Hello there and welcome back to the podcast. Today's podcast is a joint episode between Serial Killers, our podcast about arable crops, and Hydroponics Daily, our podcast all about hydroponics, because it relates to both forms of growing crops, indoor and outdoor farming. And I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, the founder of Utrema Limited, and we sell fertilizers, biostimulants, and organic biopesticides to both types of farmers. And today we're talking about the utopian world of perennial arable crops and whether they could be a crop of the future. Now, you may not be aware of this, but there are a number of perennial cereal crops. They are small, but they are commercial and you can buy them. They're not in the mainstream commodity market though. They're not sold on the markets. There's a couple of crops that have moved beyond pure research, and there are many, many more that are in the research stage. So the main one you may have heard of is called Kernza, and that is a registered trademark because it is owned by a company. And it's classed as an intermediate wheatgrass. It's the most visible commercial perennial cereal-like grain in North America. It's sold in niche, value-added foods, and it's also put into some beverages products. A lot of IPAs contain this Kernza. And it's grown at a modest scale across multiple US states. It's drawn, commercial scaling is drawn by the brand pull, supply chain building, rather than the agronomics and the fantastic thing about the crop. Now, why would you want to grow a perennial cereal? I should have talked about it from the start. Well, basically, you don't need to plow and you don't need to sow seeds every year. So both from a economics perspective, you're reducing your diesel bill by not plowing, you're reducing your bills by not buying seed, but also from a regenerative agriculture perspective. If you're not plowing the soil every year, then you are helping build soil biology and you are potentially not destroying you're not eroding the soil. So fantastic from that perspective. And also, potentially you can get your crop off to a better start by the fact that it's got a lot of biomass alive under the ground in the spring. So potentially somewhere like the UK where we have cold springs, then potentially it could be good. So something like Kernza could be a good thing. The problem is that current yields are typically well below annual wheat in many environments. And you've got the issues of managing multi-year stands. So as well as the crop building up biomass, you've got the potential for building up pest and disease in that field. There is no rotation. So that currently is a limitation in its growth. Imagine you got sort of barley yellow virus in it, then that would be in it until you kill the plant. So your 7 years suddenly goes out the window. So there are a number of different challenges when growing these sorts of crops. There's perennial rice as well as wheat. That really stands out because it could, parts of China, it's growing rapidly. There's rapid growth, sort of more than 9,000 hectares by 2020 and 15,000 by 2021. So the number of sort of small holding farms are growing perennial rice. The advantages in labour, because obviously you hand plant rice in paddy fields, and the establishment costs and challenges. So potentially perennial rice has more of a economic uptick to it than wheat. There are other perennial crops, perennial rye. The one I've looked at is perennial sorghum because there are a number of perennial varieties and sorghum's an interesting crop. It's a big crop. It's much larger than, say, wheat, and it's an industrial crop. Often it's sort of non-food use. It goes into a lot of white spirits. So a lot of the sorghum that's grown in the US grows to produce white spirit in China. That's not the stuff you use when you're decorating. White spirit is is it called beige? I think in Chinese, I think it's baijiao, which means white alcohol. Check out my Chinese Mandarin spirit knowledge. Off the top of my head, that as well. I haven't done any Googling. I do speak a bit of Chinese. Well, I can read a bit of Chinese. I can't speak it because I can't do the tones. But baijiao, that's white spirit. And that's what sorghum's used for. I grew some perennial sorghum, and what supposedly was perennial sorghum. I got the seeds, got my colleagues who sell gold leaf over in the US, the ultimate hydroponic fertilizer, to send me some seeds. However, it's not hardy in the UK. So it's mainly a crop, if it's going to be a crop, for southern states of the US, maybe sort of Mediterranean regions of Europe. So there's options as well for grain and forage. So you could potentially, once you've harvested the crop, set that field over to forage and still get put some animals on it, get some return there, and it still grow for the second year. There are a number of different organizations working on perennial sorghum, but it's not sort of widely established commercial grain. And the other advantage of sorghum is it can be used in sort of bird conservation, or if you're into hunting, you can use it as a crop for feeding and allowing your birds to, your sorts of pheasants and partridges to take cover and things like that. So that's the current state of perennial crops at the moment. But what could be done with genetic modification or gene editing, sort of CRISPR technology? What are the likely targets over the next several years if people were to put their mind to it? So the big wins, what's feasible? Reduce seed shattering. That's a big problem. Increase the seed size, plant architecture, improve the free threshing traits, easy for me to say, improve synchronization of flowering, because these are all issues with perennial arable crops, and reduce lodging. When you look at a lot of these crops like Kernza, is it called Kernza? Kernza, they are a bit sparse. I say a bit sparse, they're very sparse compared to a conventional arable crop. And there's a lot of bare earth. And so reducing lodging is going to be a key one, because there's just a lot of air in between the plants, and increasing the density they can be planted at, optimizing the fertilization, that's going to be key. Stabilizing the yield across years, knowing what the year is. Could the genes for perenniality be put into more commercial varieties that are resistant to things like rust and other things like that, rather than or could it be the other way around? Could some more of the commercial genes be put into the perennial crops? And could they be done by gene editing rather than genetic modification? So could a tweak in one or two genes induce perenniality in a annual crop? That's something to be looked at. Obviously, there's breeding for pest disease resistance, but they're a given. They're in every breeding program for any type of cereal crop. And so, yeah, that's something. Do the EU allow Kernza? That's a good question. Let me check. Yes, it looks like it's allowed in the EU. It has to be labelled as wheat allergen, but it doesn't fall foul of the EU novel food regulations, which stop just anyone introducing any plant and selling it as food, which is an issue. I think Kernza is bred in Kansas by the non-profit Land Institute, and they're actively researching it. The plants, since 2010, they've been trying to transform it, trying to breed it from a small seeded wild species into a high-yielding domesticated grain. But you've got to remember, annual wheat has, got centuries or even not thousands of years on this plant. So it's a slow process, but hopefully they will eventually be able to produce a viable, sustainable alternative to annual wheat, which is the world's most widely grown crop. And 1 in 5 of your calories come from wheat. So think about pasta and things like that. I've been told I've got to pick up some pasta for tea tonight, so I'll go and do that. It is a hot topic. There was an article in the Guardian, the British newspaper, saying soil is more important than oil inside the perennial grain revolution. I'm not sure what it's got to do with oil, but there you go. So it's a hot topic as we speak this week. The plant that Kernza comes from is native to the prairies of Kansas, and that makes sense. The other advantage I missed is that you've obviously got those mycorrhizal and beneficial microbe connections, which we sort of ignore when it comes to cereal crops because they're in the ground for such a short amount of time. It's not really worth inoculating with the mycorrhiza or promoting the mycorrhiza, but if it's a perennial crop, then it's certainly worth it. And imbuing those characteristics, the phosphorus solubilization and things like that mycorrhiza are so great for. And obviously, if the plant is living for multiple years, it's going to produce a much larger root system. And so an annual wheat plant will produce roots that go down to 0.5 meter deep. Kernza, another perennial grasses, they can go down to 3 meters deep. So you think of a prairie, you don't think of much plant material on the top, but the actual biomass, the roots going down, go crazy deep if allowed to. The soil is conducive to that. So that work's going on in Kansas. It's also being undertaken in Ukraine, which is great to hear. China for perennial rice, and then Uganda is where a lot of the perennial sorghum research is undertaken. So what's this got to do with hydroponics? I think this could be a potential crop for hydroponics because it's a small plant compared to annual wheat, and you could potentially get multiple crops per year in an indoor facility. It's high value because it's going into things like IPA and health food stores. It's not, the price you can pay is many multiples on conventional wheat. So it's that sort of feeds into that niche high value end use we talk about on Hydroponics Daily, our podcast, many days. And I think producing a stable crop that can be grown and perennially in a hydroponic setup that would be fantastic because you wouldn't have those time to set up costs, the establishment costs, which we do with legal cannabis or hops or things like this. You could be potentially, you could crop it multiple times or even continuously. I don't know. So worth getting some seeds. If you can get some seeds of perennial rice, Kernza, perennial sorghum. I think I've got some. I'm looking at some now. I've got a bag. So opposite me with perennial sorghum seeds. If you would like some, then please email me and I can get some posted to you. Just give us a like on Apple Podcast. There you go. That's all I asked for. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, then just give us a follow. I hope you've liked today's episode on perennial cereals. If you would like to check out any fertilizers, biostimulants, or organic biopesticides for use in growing your perennial arable crops or your annual arable crops, then check out utrema.co.uk. We produce products for arable crops, hydroponic crops, sports turf, lawn care. If you're growing a plant, we produce a unique, novel fertilizer for that. And you won't find that technology anywhere else. And we're more than happy to answer any of your technical questions you may have about growing crops, any challenges you've got. Just give us an email or a phone call or DM us. I'm more than happy to help you. Might not have the answer. We might not even have a product. We might recommend somebody else's product, but hopefully we can help you. That's been Serial Killers and Hydroponics Daily for today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll speak to you again, hopefully soon. If it's Hydroponics Daily, I'll speak to you tomorrow because it's a daily podcast. Serial Killers, not so much. Anyway, that's enough of the waffle. Goodbye.